Hi, and welcome to the August webinar. This is part of a 12-month series where I'm doing a webinar every month, and I'm constantly surprised at how quickly the months fly. We're already in August. And the topic for this month is how money mindset impacts reality. And I will go into explain what I actually mean by that and how that topic actually came to be. So before I do that though, I'll just do a little bit of an intro. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alpha, and I started out as a corporate tax accountant. Feels like another lifetime ago. That was what I came out of uni as a grad. Worked in that for about 6 years, and then transitioned into management consulting, and then stayed in that space for almost 10 years, and then became self-employed. Then had my daughter, and that's just any parent, especially mum, knows that changes things quite substantially. And so I was on my own personal journey, both personal development as well as my own like professional side as well. And I discovered there's a lot that we don't get taught about money. I even studied the diploma of financial planning because I was quite disillusioned with the financial planner that I'd hired. And I was stunned by how much we're not taught. And that's all personal finance as well. So I started to make changes in my own life. Friends started noticing. So they asked, what was I doing? And so I was helping friends and friends of friends. And then I started to do a little bit more in the business space because I was starting to grow a business and recognize that there wasn't really much beyond, you have a bookkeeper and an accountant and they help you with sort of keeping track and organizing stuff a little bit and then lodging all of the compliance things, whether you need to lodge quarterly activity returns or your tax returns, all of that. But then how do you actually manage the cash flow? And so that's how I came more into doing that kind of work. And then this is me as my, a fresh-faced grad going, oh, new into the world and had like zero confidence in relation to money. And I wasn't earning much of it for a very long time as well. So I was sort of struggling to try and figure out, how do I actually get ahead when I'm not earning much? And then, yeah, through my journey and so forth. And then there was a reaching a goal. Well, milestone for me was going to Uluru, and that's my little girl there. She was 6 at the time. And it was such a special trip. My mum came along as well, and we went on a helicopter ride. Excuse me, I still have a bit of a tail end of a cold. And it was such a special experience. So that's, having going from not being able to like do much. I used to eat before I went out for dinner with friends so that I didn't have to spend much on eating out, but I could still socialize to being able to, have a glass of wine at an event in Uluru and go on a helicopter. So it becomes quite surreal when you look at it like that. So, what are we going to talk about today? Today, I wanted to talk firstly a little bit about what money mindset actually is. And then also everything in life is polarity. The only reason we know what light is because we have darkness. We know what happiness is because we have sadness. There's anger and love and war and peace. Like there's so many different polarities in our life. And I've just mentioned the extremes, but there's a continuum in there as well. And so money, we see it quite black and white, but there's polarity in the relationship that we have with money as well. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And that also then demonstrates the reality that we experience too, because we all want more money. But what does that mean? How much do we need? What is it going to do for our lives? Is it money that we really want, or is it what it gives us? And that distinction is actually quite important to make. So that's when I'm also going to talk about like the actual real impact of money strategies as well. So we'll talk about the mindset, a little bit conceptual, but then also the real impacts that it has. And then also some things that you can do, that little tweaks that you can make that actually genuinely impact your money as well. So it's not just all in our heads, it's how do we translate that into the real world? Excuse me, and taking action. So money mindset is, and this is mindset in general, really. I mean, I just call it money because, well, we're talking about money here. If that comes down to our beliefs, the experiences we have in relation to those beliefs, and then the habits or the repeated behaviors that we have that reinforce those experiences that are reinforcing the habits and the beliefs, sorry, that we have. And it all becomes very interconnected. So if recently I took my daughter during the school holidays to see Inside Out 2, and I have to admit from a, there's an entertainment value, absolutely, but there's a real undertone to this movie that just demonstrates so clearly what our lives are like, especially up here. I mean, this is what this is all in. It's about inside and how the inside projects into our outside world. And this picture up here is what a lot of us are like when it comes to money. We've got anxiety driving the show. Joy is trying to leap in and, just pull anxiety back in a little bit. Then we've got shame and fear and anger and disgust and ennui or boredom, I think they called it in the movie. And, there's an envy. There's just so much that goes on in our brains. And it all happens, especially in the world that we are now, where we're so interconnected, but where we communicate so poorly with ourselves and others because there's just so much around us. And so we have all this information flung at us. We've got finfluencers on TikTok. When you think about it, it sounds really quite nuts. But all of that impacts us and then the belief systems that we have. And if you haven't seen the movie, what this image here is, all of those neon lines represent a belief that we have, and they all come up and form sort of like in our cortex in our brains, which is sort of what's represented up the pipe that's there in the background. And it's a collection of things. It's a collection of experiences. We have a belief, and then the experience creates the belief, but then reinforces the belief. And then our behavior, then again, like I said, it reinforces it too. But where we really would like to be is where, we have joy and we have anxiety working together, because we can't ever get rid of all of it. We're never going to get rid of our fear. We're never going to get rid of the anxiety. We're going to have to work with it and understand it, become aware of it, to a certain extent embrace it, but understand where it's coming from so that we can do something about it, and that we can recognize the patterns that are happening in our lives and then interrupt them before we get too ingrained in them. And because there's a lot of patterns in our lives that are very much they're based on trauma, or they're based on historical sort of part, like the way history's worked. Like for women in particular, there were certain roles that women were in, and that was just it. You couldn't get a job, you couldn't travel, and there's still places in the world to this day where a woman can't get a passport without a man, whether it's her father or a husband. She can't open a bank account. She can't drive a car. There's all these things that a woman can't do. And that, even just hearing that and knowing that, it impacts us on a subliminal level. And we need to bring that up to the consciousness so that we're aware of it and we can do something about it. I get very passionate about this, so you'll see my arms flying. So the formation cycle is where I delve into this a little bit more. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because I want to elevate the conversation today more into the practical reality of what you see as a result of all of this. But just to point out that all of this is going on inside here, and this is what you're having to deal with so that you can then recognize the outcome that you're seeing in the world. So this sense of self, and if you've read James Clear's Atomic Habits, you may recognize some of this. It's actually quite similar. I was really surprised because I'd actually created this before I read the book, based on lots of different sort of seminars and books and things that I'd read. And when I read that book, I was just like, oh my gosh, he was actually the best, I think, at bringing it all together. But I like to call this it's a formation cycle that then gets reinforced. So there's a loop of this formation cycle. So when we're a child, we don't have experiences yet. We don't necessarily even have beliefs yet. We don't even really know what they are. We're still building that sense of self. So we're a little bit of a clean slate. There are some innate things in our DNA, in our family history, in our gender history, in our cultural history, even geographically where we're located. So all of that is still in there, but we're not really conscious of it yet because we're still trying to figure out who we are within and around all of that. So that's our sense of self, which then formulates as beliefs, which then happen there. We have behaviors that reinforce those beliefs, and those repeated behaviors and thoughts become habits. And then they reinforce our sense of self. And before we know it, we are stuck in this loop going round and round without any ability or the perception of any ability to actually do something about it. And when it gets interrupted, it's generally something dramatic that will interrupt it. There'll be an illness, an accident, perhaps some sort of some sort of trauma. And we don't want it to get to that point. You need to try and quite often what I see happen as the triggers is age or becoming a parent. As soon as we become parents, our priorities change, our desire to to do things change. I don't think I've ever been as healthy or as fit as when I was pregnant and then when my daughter was little and she was still breastfeeding, because I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for her. And then, so now the realization is like, why don't I do it for me? You know, why did it have to take that extreme situation of becoming a parent to make that happen and make that change? But rightly or wrongly, that's a reality quite that we live with. And so it happens, and that's often a trigger. And then the next kind of phase I find is when children start to go to school and they're a bit more independent and you have a little bit more time on your hands, a little bit. And then you start to kind of ponder and go, oh my goodness, I'm getting older. I now have kids in school. Like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life, with my money? What's my purpose? What am I doing? So there's these sorts of things that will interrupt the cycle, I tend to find anyway. But if we can at least be consciously aware of them, then we can do something a little more intentional about it as well. Now, your relationship with money tends to, and again, I'm talking polarities here. So I'm emphasizing the extremes to make a point. So we have this like confusion. What am I doing? I don't know what to do. Overwhelm versus I love money. Like, how many people would actually come out and openly say to you, I love money. I love what it allows me to do. I love that, you know, there'll be justifications perhaps that will go with that. And to a certain extent, when we're explaining it, like, oh, I love what it does. I love that I can do what I want when I want. I love that I can pick my daughter up from school every day and drop her off at school every day. Like, I love the flexibility and the freedom that it allows. So there's all sorts of, and it's different for everyone. But this is generally the relationship that we have. It's either it's kind of something I try to avoid, although I know it's there, but I've let my partner handle it, or I'm just, as a business owner, my accountant's doing it. Yeah, until they're not. Versus, yes, show me the money. I love that scene in the movie Jerry Maguire, where Jerry Maguire's a sports agent and he's on the phone with one of his clients who's a little bit difficult. And he wants the money. And so he's saying to Jerry Maguire, to yell at him over the phone, show me the money. And it was such an interesting scene because we all had a different visceral response to it. Did we kind of just go, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that. I can't believe they're saying that, or just turn it off, put it on mute, versus, wow, this is really cool. And I have to admit, I didn't think it was super duper cool when I first saw it. I was a little bit shocked. I'm going, wow, okay, that's kind of interesting. It was, so looking back on it now, doing what I do, because I wasn't doing this back then when that movie came out and I first saw it. But it's really interesting. So start to question, assess your relationship with money. So let's start to actually look at some of I think I've got about 5 of them here in relation to your relationship with money and where you may be and where you'd like to be. And again, this is a continuum. So these are the extremes, and you might be somewhere in the middle, but you may not be necessarily where you want to be. And it's, again, becoming aware of that fact. So it's very easy to become overwhelmed in life in general. Money, yes, absolutely, because there's so much. Even just before I got an email from a shoe, because I have very like odd feet. So there's only a couple of places I can buy shoes. And this shoe store, they're having a sale. So I just thought, I'll have a little sticky beak. And they accept, I don't know how many different types of payments, including some sort of OIN that I've never heard of. And I was like, oh my goodness, even these guys are getting into it as well. And sometimes it just feels too overwhelming to have too many choices for how to even pay for something. I'm like, yeah, no, just close. It's easier. So we often tend to step back when something overwhelms us. And so that can be information overload. There's all sorts of things in the media, and, I get we need to be informed, but at the same time, sometimes it can be the wrong information at the wrong time, presented in the wrong way. And it's just not necessarily helpful. But knowing that can sometimes be the issue. And fear, with overwhelm can often come the fear of making the wrong decision. And I see this a lot. It's like, I don't want to do anything because do I do this, or do I do this, or do I do this? Do I do all of it? Like, what do I do? It's too overwhelming. So again, when we're too overwhelmed, we tend to do nothing. And if we're scared of investing money and losing it, especially as we get older, we recognize that there's less time to play with. So that tends to enhance that fear. And then there's just confusion. What does this mean? You know, there's shares and there's stocks. What's the difference? You're like, well, there is none. And you're like, well, why are there two words to mean the same thing? So there's that kind of, so there's a jargon and a language that goes with it. And I often find that financial institutions tend to use that to their advantage. And it has a negative effect, but it also then has the effect that people have to rely on them because they're like, well, I don't understand it. They do. I'll just pay them to do it for me. And that is something that, will never help us in the long run. That staying in ignorance is never going to be a good thing. And that confusion is unnecessary as well, because it does not have to be that complicated. So we want to kind of shift from that overwhelm over into the confidence side. And how this could play out in your life is being able to understand what you need to know and know that you don't need to know everything. And I had to go on this path as well. I was like, well, I should be investing. I didn't want to invest in property in the traditional sense of like buying an investment property. So I looked at property development. I joined a group, I did a course, and then I looked at share investing, which was actually more share trading. And so I did, I learned about candlestick charts and technical analysis and all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. This is too much, too much pressure. I'll pay someone to invest for me. But then that didn't work either. So the confidence levels just kind of like dropped, but then, curiosity really kicked in. We'll get to that. Though understanding, so where the confidence part also comes, is understanding the theory and the practicality of the elements that are relevant to you. And like I said, when it comes to investing, which is something that I get a lot of questions about, it's understanding that there is a difference between investing and trading. And the two terms are often confused. So when someone talks about investing in shares, that's buy and hold. That's investing. You're an investor. You stay in the market. Whereas trading is buying and selling. And you can buy and sell shares, you can buy and sell currency, you can buy and sell commodities. There's so many different things. A whole different topic, which I actually cover in my next webinar in September. But it's understanding what's relevant to you. And then also knowing that if you don't understand something, you have the ability to figure it out, that you have the intelligence, you have the ability to do it. Because a lot of times people say to me, I'm just not good at this. I'm not good at math. I don't understand any of this. It's too complicated. You're reinforcing that you're telling yourself that, though. I hope you realize too. But you can. If you want to, you can. All you have to do is start with a question. What is this? Explain this to me, please. And ask the question as many times as you need to understand it. Many years ago, when I was at university the first time, because I've been a couple of times, and I was studying economics. Well, I was studying business, and economics was one of the subjects. It was my worst subject. I just didn't get it. Admittedly, the lecturer was also, English was not his first language, so I had difficulty understanding what he was saying. But even when I was reading the textbooks, and I was, in those days, we didn't really use the internet much, goes to show my age. And I was like, I still don't get it. Demand, supply, like, yeah, micro, macro, like, I still don't really get it. So that was the only C I ever got at uni, was in economics. Then fast forward about a year, and a lecturer that I got along really well with, he connected me up with the economics professor and said, oh, he needs a tutor. And I was like, no, 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 no. I can't tutor economics. I'm like, that was the one I did worst at. Well, when I had to start teaching it, oh my goodness, I could understand it. And then I could start explaining it to my students in a really, really simple way, not in some convoluted, complex, way that nobody really understood it unless you were naturally inclined for that. And I was not. But I found it so enlivening and exciting. Now I got this thing called economics, and I could explain it to my kids, and I could see their light bulbs go off too. So it builds, and you just have to keep at it, get curious, and just ask the questions and know that you have the ability. So I know now that I couldn't do it. Perhaps I wasn't ready, but I also needed it in a certain way. So somehow by teaching it, I learned it. I'm not saying everybody needs to learn it that way, but that was what worked for me. So the next continuum I'd like us to contemplate is how procrastination plays out in our lives. And procrastination is something that, we all do. My house is the cleanest when I'm procrastinating, because I will clean every little crevice, all the cornices and the skirting boards will get cleaned because I'm avoiding something. But it's because I'm not clear on what it is that I'm doing. So I now every day I've got my little post-it notes here. So anyway, but I have written on a post-it note the three things that I want to do each day. And goodness gracious, I get a lot done because I'm so clear. I get in and I do them, and I'm constantly asked like, "How are you so productive?" And I was like, "Well, I just know what I'm doing. Like I'm clear on what it is that I have to do." And I actually have to spend time sometimes to get clear as well. It's not like I wake up every morning and I have a perfect plan in my head. I sometimes have to actually go, okay, look at my priorities. What day of the week is it? And I tend to schedule days to have certain themes with them as well, which helps. So getting clear will help you overcome the procrastination. What is it that you want to know? Do you want to know how to pay off debt faster? Is that the thing that's worrying you the most? Or are you a bit unsure about how to increase your superannuation or your retirement savings? Is that something that's worrying you? Or do you have a question about whether or not you should be doing certain things? Can you invest and pay off debt at the same time? You might have read something about it and you're a bit curious. Even if you're just clear about one question, that's enough for you to then take action, which is the other end of the continuum. Again, procrastination will also come about if we're afraid. So if there's fear around looking at your finances because you don't know if you'll like what you see, let me tell you, they're not going to get any better by you not looking at them. So it's better to look than to avoid, just saying. And then if you've already got too many things to do, you're like, oh my gosh, I've already got this and this and this and this. And I mean, even today, I was like, I want to do washing. I make bread, so I make sourdough, so it's a long process. I still have to make the soup for my daughter's dinner because I'm taking her to gymnastics. By the time I get home, it's too late. All of these things are like ticking around in your head. Sometimes I can't fall asleep straight away at night because I'm like, well, there's this, and I write a note. I'm like, oh, and then that is, then I write a note. Like it's just a constant ticking. So we've got to have strategies in place to help with that as well. Mindfulness, meditation, breath work, even just posture, sitting at the desk. I was like, well, I can't breathe if I'm not sitting up straight enough. So then the other end of that continuum to procrastination, once we start to get clear and we start to acknowledge the fear and push through it anyway, and then get clearer on what we have to do, because that's the other thing. Clarity then helps us prioritize. And once we're clear on our priorities, it helps us then take action. So clarity on the lifestyle we want is also a really good way to help with getting clarity from your finances. So what does that look like? What kind of house do you live in right now? Is that the house? Is that your forever house? Is that where you want to live out your days? Is it where you want to live until the kids move out and then maybe you want to downsize and you've got a vision of something else? Do you want to sell that house and buy something else, or do you want to keep that one and save to buy your dream house, so to speak? How much, where is that? Is that rural? Is it in the city? What does that look like? How much would that look like? How much you can Google this as well. You can even ask the like chat GPTs, and there's another one called Perplexity I found recently, which is quite good. Your AI tools based on information that's freely available on the internet. As a couple retiring at this age, how much would you need to live on each year? So what superannuation or what retirement balance do I need to have by that age? And then you can start to work backwards. You're like, okay, well, if that's what I need, this is what I've got. Here's the gap. How much would I need to, we're going to, exclude returns for now. How much would I need to contribute into that fund every year in order to get to that desired end? Sometimes you might go, oh gosh, okay, all right, well, I better start now. Or, oh, it's not actually as bad as I thought. So, but without that clarity, it's really hard to do anything and make any decisions. And I'm a really big fan of starting with the end in mind and working back. That's not to say you don't change your mind along the way. You might have an inheritance come to you, or you might have a change of heart about where you want to live or how you want to live, or you might just like the idea of living in a caravan. Like, who knows, whatever it happens to be. And then you list out your priorities and then understand what your next step is. So it's all about incremental steps. This isn't about the big, what are those big, hairy, audacious goals. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go. BHAG, my gosh. Another acronym. It's not about that. It's about the collection of all of the little things that you do. It's the same in relationships. It's not the big gestures that you do once a year and then you ignore that person entirely. It's the collection of all the little things. It's all of those moments you spend with your child. It's those times before bed when they want to talk to you and they share things that they wouldn't have shared earlier in the day because their brains were too engaged. It's those moments with your partner when you really connect, or you have like somebody tells a joke and you belly laugh. When was the last time you had like a proper belly laugh? My daughter and I were having a bit of a giggle fest on the weekend, and oh my gosh, it felt good. Plus, I was like, I think I'm working my tummy muscles. Anyway, I digress, but you understand, hopefully you get my meaning about that, moving from procrastination to action. And then the other thing too is we go from being indecisive to making decisions. So that's again, there's a similarity between a lot of these, but they do tend to play out in reality and they look a little different. So it's important to be aware of them. So being indecisive. And some people I had a friend many years ago, and whenever we'd go out and we'd go shopping and she'd be looking for something, and we'd shopping all day. She'd look at all of these different things that she was looking for that was similar to what she was looking for. And then she'd finally make a decision. And then the next time I saw her, she'd gone and taken it back. And I was like, right, okay. Whereas I'm a lot more decisive. So she kind of identified as an indecisive sort of a person. I was like, well, again, there's where that identity part comes in. Whereas I'm more decisive. Sometimes I will do a lot of research and I will ponder scenarios and I'll do a whole lot, but when I've made my decision, that's it. Not to say that it will never change, but I need to actually at least implement something to see if give it a go. So that's where, you can identify as an indecisive person or somebody who makes decisions easily, but you need to try and disconnect yourself from that identity piece and actually look at the underlying reasons behind it. So are you worried about getting it wrong? Again, similar to what we spoke about before, but that is one of the main things I see. Like, oh, I don't know, do I invest in this stock or which platform do I use? Is this platform better than that platform? I don't know. Like, I don't know which one. And then in the end, it doesn't matter. Just pick one. And then sometimes when it comes to investing, as long as you're looking at things holistically and you've got sort of a diversified portfolio, sometimes it doesn't matter too much. But there's lots of research out there and lots of people that you can ask that will help with that. You don't have to do it alone. Are you concerned that you should have done something years ago and then you spend more years pondering and then more years have passed and then you're like, oh dear, I should have done that 10 years ago. I see this a lot. I do a lot of scenario projections for my clients where I'm like, okay, if you did these and these things, this is what it would look like in 5 years. This is what it would look like in 10 years. But in order to do that, you've got to do this. You've got to set this in motion now. And that kind of thing, people are like, oh my gosh, that's the reality check that kind of it prompts the action to actually happen because they can see what the future looks like. They know the past and they have a little bit of a vision of that. And so the decision becomes a lot easier to make. And that's again where there's some clarity. And then the gathering information. This is one I also see quite a lot. And I can fall into this as well. It's like, I don't have enough information yet to make a decision. I need more information. At some point, when is enough enough? So you have to actually like put a line in the sand and say, I'm going to give myself until this date. I will then make this decision and on we move. So then on the decisiveness side of the poll, we recognize that doing something is better than doing nothing. And I'm talking specifically about saving and investing here. This is not about, if I dig a hole, it's better to start than not, and then they've got a hole that's unfinished. It's not that kind of thing at all. But when it comes to money, taking action and doing something is better, but it has to be aligned with your values, aligned with your vision of what you want. So there's parameters around that. And then being decisive, so identifying as a person who can make financial decisions. This is where that identity piece becomes really important, and the beliefs that you have around that and the stories you tell yourself around that. And the more decisive, the more decisions you make, the easier you realize it is. And then your identity starts to shift and change. And sometimes it happens without you even being aware of it. Again, I see this quite a lot when I have clients who come to me and they tell me, their history, what they've done up until now. And then, then I say, okay, well, what are some beliefs that you have around money? And then they'll share some of those beliefs. And I'm like, well, you do realize that your actions don't actually match, because if you believe this, look at what you've achieved. So sometimes our actions and the decisions that we make can actually give us enough confidence and momentum to actually bust the beliefs without us being aware of it. So it's an interesting little loop, that one. Us humans can be quite complex sometimes, but it takes someone else to point it out because we don't often do this for ourselves. Another one, this one I actually have to admit, this is probably one of my favorite ones because I'm such a fan of lifelong learning, that like coming at life with a curiosity. I love it, and it keeps us young and childlike, not childish, childlike. So I'll start on the failure side. And many years ago, I went to a John Demartini seminar, and one thing he said stuck with me. And he says lots because he talks. If you've ever listened to him, he talks a mile a minute. But one thing he said really stuck with me, which is, Fear is future events appearing real. Now, I've since heard a lot of different versions of this, but this one is the one that really resonated with me and it's stuck in my mind. And what makes it so powerful is that we worry about something at the moment that may or may never happen. And the fear of that future possible state is what stops us from doing something in the now. And for me and my personality, I don't like being constrained. It's one of the things I love about money is that it gives me choices. I don't want anything to put boundaries around me unless I do it myself. And if I do it myself, then I need to own it, take responsibility for that. But in this case, I don't want fear to hold me back. No, unless it's something stupid, like I'm not going to jump off a bridge without a parachute, that kind of thing. But that, like, unnecessary fear, sometimes we can harness that and use that energy because there's an additional energy that comes with fear rather than letting it cripple us and completely push us down. Take it and hold on to it and bring it along for the journey. Jen Gottlieb's book Be Seen talks about this, and I think she's actually referring to an Elizabeth Gilbert book called Big Magic, where it's like put fear in the passenger seat, not the driver's seat, passenger seat. It can come along for the ride and you can use the energy that comes with it, but you're still driving. You're still directing the show. It's your life. You're the leading lady or leading man, whoever's listening. The other part of fear is that it comes imposter syndrome. And, there's a lot of things around whether it's a thing or not. Well, whether it is or isn't a thing or a name, we can often feel inadequate. And whether that inadequacy is feeling like an imposter, or however it plays for you and however it feels in your body. But we often have concerns. And to be honest, that's a good thing, because if we're unsure if we're good enough for something, then it means we're human and we care enough about what we're doing to actually go, do I know enough? Am I good enough to actually help people with this? Just by even questioning that means that you are. So, but it's there and it's a reality. So rather than just ignoring it, like lean into it and go, why? Is it genuinely because I do need to do some more research or some more study? Or is it purely because I've never done this before? And so I have no precedent in my working memory to say that, yes, you can do this. And if that's all it is, then there's only one way to overcome that. It's to actually do it. And then you've got to prove, and then you need to reflect and go, okay, oh, wow, I didn't think I could do that, but I did it. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. What else do I want to do that I can't do right now? And then pushing through that will become easier because you've got the proof that you've already done it in a different scenario. And then negativity bias. This is again out of, there's a lot of psychology and NLP and a lot of this, but that negativity bias is there to keep us safe. Fundamentally, our brains are wired for survival. We are designed to seek out dangerous situations that could possibly hurt or kill us and try and avoid them ahead of time, which is again where that fear aspect comes in. So recognizing that that exists is really important because it's that whole like glass half full, glass half empty. That's really oversimplifying it. But rather than coming at something and going, okay, well, what could go wrong here? What's bad about this? Why isn't this working? You're like, okay, well, how could this work? How could I turn this around? Is this savable? And then come at it from a different perspective, change your languaging, and the physiology that goes with that changes too. And then again, all of this to me comes down to curiosity, having a curiosity about yourself, about other people, about what it is that you're doing, how you're helping, what you're learning in your own life, and how you can harness that to help others, and recognizing that you are able to do it. So when it comes to money, if you've made mistakes and you don't know what to do, find someone else who knows a bit more than you do and then ask them. And that's how I started. And to be honest, that's where I learned lessons the hard way, credit card debt and, not earning much. And, then I was self-employed and I was having my daughter and didn't have work, didn't know when I was going to work again. And then a financial planner who I spent thousands of dollars on and it didn't really amount to anything. So, but that led to study, and that curiosity that came with wanting to understand it is what's got me where I am today, which is why I'm so passionate about that one. All right. I think this is the last one on our money relationship. So going from frustration to peace and happiness. And ultimately, we want to be happy. We want to feel peace as well as humans. That constant fight or flight and the cortisol levels and all of that, they're fine for a period of time, but we're not supposed to stay in that state. We need to, find a place of peace, which is why there's so much these days about positive psychology and mindfulness, and meditation, all the yoga, all of these kinds of things is to try and bring our bodies, regulate them back into a state of peace so that we can experience happiness on our terms and whatever that means for us. But prior to that, we sit in this state of frustration and we get stuck in a cycle, potentially of never having enough money. Every month the bills are higher than the income or the money that's there to pay them. That's a cycle. Not clear on how to get out of that is, staying buried in that lack of clarity is a source of frustration. Unsure of how to even grow wealth. What does that even mean? Having the concept of how can I even think about that when I can't even pay my bills? Like that type of thing. That's a source of frustration. And trying to feel how that feels in the body, it doesn't feel nice. And staying in that constantly becomes like a steady state, and our nervous systems just start to shut down. We deregulate. We don't take care of ourselves. We don't eat well. We don't exercise. We don't get enough sunshine. It's not a healthy way to be. So where we want to try and move to is having the recognition or recognizing that we still have things to learn, but we're moving towards, we're not moving away from something bad. We're moving towards something that we want. And then we're not scared of looking at our money, that we have the ability to look at it and look at it in a positive way with peace behind it, and that we can build financially step by step, because that's really important to recognize as well. Now, a little bit more of the practicality here now. So how does this really play out? So this here, I did this visual recently and I was like, oh my gosh, when we see this, it's quite different. This is typically the path that we've been traditionally told. You grow up, you get a job, you might make some mistakes, you get some credit card debt, you might, take on a personal loan for a car or a motorbike or a boat or a jet ski. And then you're like, oh crap, I should probably start saving. I should save for a house, I guess. And then you start saving. And then, if you're depending on how much you've managed to save, you could buy a home, on a mortgage. So the bank owns most of it. And then you just hope that interest rates don't go up too much and you can still afford to pay it. And so you spend, a lot of decades paying off debt. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, I've pretty much paid off my home. I should probably start like doing something other than, having a home now. So I'll start investing. And then you're like, oh, well, there's retirement. So it's very linear. And you're never going to achieve financial abundance that way. So what you end up having to do is a bit of everything all at once. So saving, investing, managing your money better, paying off debt, earning money. It's all got to come together in a big picture. And this is where having a clearer view of what it is that you want so that you can put that money into the different. So I work on a money pie where you split up your money into different areas. You do that in your business, and then you also do that in your personal life. Makes it a lot easier to manage because we can chunk it down and we can give our money a purpose, which is something that I bang on quite a lot about. And just as an actual example, so this is paying off debt, and just has some little tweaks can have this. This is just seriously one of the most minor tweaks you can do. And I'm hoping you know this. I really am, because if not, then our system is really failing. So this is a mortgage scenario, $500,000, assuming at the moment a 6% interest rate, which is probably roughly maybe on the low side. I don't know. It's meant to be, somewhat representative. Purely by paying your repayments fortnightly instead of monthly takes 3 years off your loan. 3 years, and saves you more than $62,000. Like, can you imagine? That money is in your bank account, not the bank's. You can invest that money. You can then, go on put it in your retirement fund. You can go on a bit of a holiday once you retire. Like, you can do so many more things. Like, that's a substantial amount of money. And that's literally the only change here is paying your repayments fortnightly. And that's literally just half. So instead of paying $3,500 a month, you pay $1,750 a fortnight. Makes such a difference, just that little tweak. And then the one other example I have is compounding on investing or saving. So in this scenario, I've used a pretty low interest rate. It's around our saving interest rate at the moment. Investing, you would earn a bit more, which obviously increases these numbers. So let's say you start with $100 and you invest $100 a month, and we're assuming a 5% annual return, which is, like I said, for cash at the moment, it's pretty appropriate, but for investing, it's very conservative. On average, I would say between 8 and 10% for for investing, and over 20 years. So if you're in your 40s, then this 20-year time frame is realistic. And so this assumes that you don't increase that contribution at all. It's just $100 a month for the next 20 years, consistently, regularly. You'll have nearly 40, or just over $41,000. Like that's huge. And if you did nothing, you wouldn't have that money. So this is why starting now and the course of time will help you. If you started with $100, so this scenario just changes one little thing, and you start by investing $100 a month, and then each year you increase that contribution by 5%. So year one, it's $100 a month. Year two, it's $105 a month, and so on and so on. That return then increases over the 20 years, still 5% return, from $41,000 to almost $63,000. So over $20,000 difference just by increasing your contribution by 5% a year. See, just little tweaks. This is why it's the little things that make the biggest difference when it comes to money. I'm hoping you're really getting that message today. And this is just, if you want this will be, in the replay, if you want to have a bit more of a look at it. But basically what it's talking about is the over time. So I think it starts in 1993 to 2003. So we're looking over like a 30-year period, what the share market has done, and how, there's dips and things, but it overall will always go up. So you can see all the various US shares, Australian shares, international shares in general, listed property, bonds are a bit more flat, then cash, a bit more flat as well. And CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, which is basically inflation. So we look at the inflation rate there, which is quite a lot lower in comparison to what the share market's been doing. So get in is the thing, and start investing. And like I said, it's step by step. It's the incremental steps that will lead you to where you want to go, one small step at a time. But you have to stay focused, be emotionally invested, be consistent, and be disciplined with it as well. So you only fail if you quit. I love this saying. I've heard it a number of times, and every time I hear it, and I say it to myself quite a lot as well, because not everything goes 100% well all the time. But you will only fail if you quit. If you quit, then that's it. It's done deal. So just at least get started and keep going. So to wrap it up, this is what we spoke about today. What is money mindset? And the money relationship that you can have, and the polarity there, and how it will play out in real life, and what actually it means for you. And then some real life money strategies. So looking at how to pay off your debt faster, investing or saving, and just what those little tweaks will make a difference in your life. Now, I just wanted to mention a couple of little things. So I have, if you would like just a one-off session, I do a money management assessment where basically it's very sort of strategy level. We look at how everything's going, what you want, what your concerns are, and we can get through a lot in an hour. It's a 60-minute session, and we look at business, finances, and personal, and we could just generally, I just have an overlooking arch view of everything, and can give you some tools and strategies to get started with. And I can send you some of my templates as well, depending on what's relevant for your situation. So that's only $297. So that one is, I find this one really useful for a lot of people. I also have a group program, which is open 3 times a year. It's closed at the moment, which is why it's joined the waitlist. But it's money mindset and money management systems together in a 12-week live program focused to business owners. So it's about reducing the overwhelm, breaking the old money patterns, and being clear about what you want your money to do, and then helping you keep more of the money you make, and getting systems to free up your time so that you can also have more visibility over what's actually going on with your money. And then you have more money to enjoy your life. So if you're interested in that one, jump on the wait list. The website's there, moneyessentialsbusiness.com.